Alright, welcome everyone, I'm Mark Seljan again, and to start with the retopologizing, you just have to make sure that the ribbon is opened and your model is actually an editable poly. Now, if you have nothing selected, the ribbon cannot show any information. If the ribbon is not open, of course, it will not show the content. And it may happen that the ribbon is there but minimized to not a tray but minimized to a top shelf. So there are actually two tiny little buttons here, and when you press this rounded white rectangle with a play in, now it is the small one, so it is pretty much useless at this form. So you have to everything is there, but your brush and all the items are just so hard to assess, so it's not that comfortable at all. Okay, so we'll leave it open. It takes some time to load, so don't be surprised. And it also requires a couple of things to deal with, because time and update needs to be done on the screen. Okay, so don't hurry it, press once, wait until it shows. Now, we are not there yet to start. You have to create a new item, a new object that's actually wrapping onto the model. So now take a look on the different methods. How can we start a project like this one? I will show the first one. I usually like to call this a secure way to start retopologizing, because sometimes if you have a very high resolution model, so this one is not so high, it's way below 500,000, so it's not that. But if you have a really dense 3D scanned content, you don't want to convert it in editable poly and accidentally jumping into vertices and trying to start from there. So now we are starting outside. So I will create a new simple plane, but this plane need to be quite close to the head. So to do that, I will start plane, turn on auto grid, and this will help me to move and stay the cursor hover the cursor over the model itself. So just like a post-it, I can place this, and here we go. I don't need that many segments, so segment number is lowered. Actually, it could be done a really small size. Alright, now I have this very basic and simple item. It could be converted into an editable poly, and because we will use symmetry later on, it is advised to reorient the symmetry in the center of the pivot point of this model. Now, how to reorient that pivot point? First of all, you can go to the hierarchy, affect pivot only. Now, as you see, this is the pivot point of the object itself, so this is the real life pivot point. We will reset this one to the world. Okay, so actually the height, why not? Okay, so the height is as well, it's reset to the bottom, so just right click everywhere and that will set it to 0. Now this is just a position. Of course we have an orientation, so I will just align it to the world. Now alignment is also done, so both position and both alignment are done. Affect pivot only, just close it, and here we go, we have this item. Now, to make sure that everything is flattened out and we don't have any transformations linked to this model, I will use the reset X form just showed in the previous video. Reset selected, right click, going back to editable poly. And when I'm using a symmetry, just a quick example, I'm looking for the symmetry modifier, and now it will be absolutely symmetrical. If you don't make this reset and pivot point trick, your symmetry will be off, because it will just respect the original orientation of the of the plane. Now I will delete this one. Here is the plane, and because it's an editable poly, everything is visible here. Now to start, I can tell that I don't want to work on the grid. Our goal here is to wrap this item onto the head. So just clicking on a draw on surface will do this for us. Now the second issue that's coming along, we have to tell the software what the actual surface is, or target surface. So this pick one is actually a button. It's not really indicated, but it is a button, again, just like you're used to 3dsmax. So pick. Now tell 3dsmax that, okay, we want to work on the head, and take a look what we just did. Now we have a model, we have vertices, everything like that, and just try to move it on the surface. So when you're using these tools, the benefit of using these and the purpose of using these, that whenever you make a transformation, whenever you create kind of change, these will stick your model to the surface. Now what happens? I'm using the drag, but because the resolution difference, it is, of course, in some cases it is sinking into the surface, some cases it is just staying on top. Now to deal with that and to make it a little bit easier to manage, it's a good idea to adjust offset. Alright, so now I will just adjust 0.1 or 0.1, depending on the computer and the installment. Sometimes it is 0.1, sometimes it is 0.1. Okay, so it's depending on your region and your settings. Alright, now I can drag these points one by one, but there's a faster way. If you're using a conform, it acts like an iron. So right now, as I'm moving over the conform brush, it will reorient the offset of every point that I touch. Okay, so here we go. Now it is done. Alright, this is one way to start a model. Now I have this plane 001, and the head and the eyes. So this was one method. Now take a look for another method. This other method could be used if we have a lower resolution model, like in this case it's way below 500,000. Actually under 1 million it's easy that you can deal with that. But if you have a messy model with problematic vertices, crazy points, then it's better if you are starting from this outside method. So you're starting to separate the plane, put it onto something with an auto grid, and then convert it into an editable poly. Tell it what you want to do, what you want to stick to, and start from there. But now this is the other option. We have the model, it is an editable poly. This is the source model. I will delete this one now. So this is the source model, and I want to start something new. Now how to start something new? I have to tell 3dsmax that I need a new model. So this is the easiest way to start this is by going here, polydraw, and we will use this feature called new object. But before we are jumping on it, take a look at here. Now we have a head selected, so the head is selected. At the moment when you're clicking on new object, it will tell box 001, and it will enter into sub-object mode, but actually there is no geometry at the moment. Okay, so it's a fully empty editable poly feature. Now when you start to make your model, then it will be filled up with the content. So the easiest way is by going with the topology brush. So I'm hitting on topology brush and create a cross, something like a crossword or a tic-tac-toe game. A couple lines. If you're doing these kind of lines, it's not working. Okay, so it's not working that way. When you are holding down Control and clicking, that will remove an edge. So I will just make it here. If you're holding down Shift, then you can follow an edge. All right, it is not that super accurate, so it's not the best and the fastest way if you want to create an entire topology, but it's very good and quite reliable to start with. Now when you're done, you can exit the topology brush by right click, and you have the model here, the absolutely newly created editable poly. It's called box. It has all the elements, it's on the surface, and now you are ready to go, and it's already sticking to the surface is the head, so the points will follow the head, so whatever you do, it will follow. And of course offset is already set, so here we have that one as well. Now this is a good way to start with the topology brush, but don't forget you have to click on new object. Okay, now check different options here. So we have these shapes. This shape is just let me find a relatively boring surface. Shape is actually creating a patch that's good for environmental modeling, but it's in our case it is just not that detailed that we're looking for. We can create splines, for example editing hair, or creating roots of different foliage or anything like that, flowing or any kind of effects, pathways, for example. So these splines are created. Now we have a couple interesting stuff like the surface. The surface is very useful and it's quite effective. The only issue is if you're using the surface that you have to take care of the units. Alright, because just let me show it quickly. You will instantly see. So I'll start dragging and holding down the button, and this is just something crazy and weird looking shape, and we have to avoid this one because this resolution is a little bit different. If you're working on a landscape, of course this resolution will be just fine, but for a small thing like this it is not that good. But it is one very fast brush, so just let me show it. I will undo, and in the polydraw we have a distance value and in pixel units and in units. So it's a measured unit, that means it is a fixed size unit, and this one is a screen resolution. So that means we're starting, for example, from 2. That's minimum distance is 2. Now let me check it. Okay, and I'm zooming in, and we'll try to move on. Okay, it's actually flowing. Yeah, so it's in pixels. In a different brush it will become important. Now this is the size 2 minimal distance, and as I see that this brush is not screen dependent, but if we are switching to strips, that is screen dependent. Okay, so this polydraw feature, this in pixels and units, is actually, if you're switching to units, it turns off the pixel mode. Now if you are using this strips brush in pixel mode, then you have a screen distance sensitive brush size adjustment. Okay, now going back to the surface because it's not finished yet. When you are holding down the shift key, this surface feature will try to connect to the existing part of your model. It is a really good feature to have. If you're holding down control, then you can delete areas, and when you're holding down shift again you can fill them back. It is very fast if you have something static and you don't want to spend too much time on it, but you want to create a smooth model. Then because it's full quad, you can use it effectively. So it's for environmental models, it could be really a good starting point. All right, or if something is in the distance, it is also working well. Okay, now we are done with shape, splines, surface. We have topology. We just discussed topology at the beginning, and now take a look at strips, because I've just started exploring strips. But before we are doing that, just let me delete this element. So edit table poly in element feature, just let me delete this one. Okay, because we already have a couple. And take a look at the strips. Now, when we're starting with the strips, this is just way too small, so it's not working properly. If I'm zooming in, it is there, but come on, it's 3 times higher in resolution than as the original model. So I will go back to Polydraw, and what I can do, I can increase the size, for example, about 10. Just let me check it, do it again. Now it's still too small. If I'm making a distance change, because it is still measuring in distance. Oh no, 10 was not that. Okay, now it's better. So if I'm zooming out, and even if it's resized to 10, it is still too small. But as soon as I'm zooming back again, this will be just again way too tiny. Now, the optimal way, if you just start using it at level 1, for example, and turning on in units. Now the problem is, it is not as small as optimally it should be, but it's still kind of at the lowest level. You cannot add 1.5. It's not working that way. So you have 1, 2, or 3. That's it. So you have you don't have so small values, but anyway, it's a good start. So a stripe could be used here, for example, starting around the eye, or if you have a larger area, for example, like the neck, you can start at the middle, and later on you can extend this mesh all around. So it's a good way to start if you don't want to use the topology, but the topology brush is usually the better one in this option. Okay, now take a look what our brushes do. So we have offset, that's already done, and we're done with the strips. Offset setting was used, so I will use the conform brush to make sure that everything is fine. Now, if you're using conform brushes, there may be a chance that these conform brushes are just somehow being off. And it may happen because if the conform value is too low, the offset can also suffer. So it happens if you're using with the relax. Sometimes if you're using the relax brush, it is simply just destroys the entire model and pushes it into the original surface, because it cannot maintain the conform value. So that happens if you see that something is sinking into the model. That's usually a sign of a conform value is too low. Now here we have the move. This one's also nice stuff to use, but it's not effective if you have just a couple points. It's much better if you have a huge surface. For tiny surfaces like this one, it is not that effective. It's actually just acting like something like the drag. Okay. There are options for scaling and rotating, but it is just organizing the mesh. So scale, if you're taking a distance, the scale will be much more using a higher fall off. If you're zooming in, then scaling is just using a smaller fall off. So distance acts like a size variable for the brush. Okay, rotation, so you can rotate, or actually it's kind of twisting. Alright, now take a look at the building part. So just drag, and I want to create some tidiness here, and start looking over the extent. So this is the most useful brush in this situation. Now, first of all, if you don't press any hotkeys, it is actually dragging a quad from a vertex. So I can start from here, and it drags a quad from vertex. It is a quad. We have 4 points, 4 corners. Even if it looks like 2 triangles, it is a quad actually. Now, of course, it's not effective. So some cases you are using this side drag method, but usually you are driving along edges. So you are building up polygons by creating edge extrusions. So I'm holding down the shift key, and this is a first hotkey, and it's often used. So I'm holding down shift key and dragging out an edge, and now I have a polygon. I can do it in any direction. So if I want to do it from here, I'm holding down shift key, dragging it out. And now what? Once you have kind of an angle, you can use the default method that creates a quad started from a vertex. So started from a vertex, this is my starting point, and now I can drag it out. Now I can make the extension. Okay, and maybe fill this gap. How cool is that? If I want to move forward, what I can do, oh, not this one, I can delete this one, because we have control hotkey. So if you press control, now you can delete a polygon, and again, shift and drag will create an extrusion polygon, and from a simple vertex you can start the extend if you don't use any other hotkeys. Now what happens if you want to make a correction other than delete? Again, so deleting is by holding control and tapping on a polygon. We are still in extend mode. How to manipulate the vertex if you want to change the position of the vertex and you don't want to go to drag. So this is what you want to do, but you don't want to leave extend. Then you are using the Ctrl Shift and Alt combination. So I'm using Ctrl Shift and Alt everything all together, and the left mouse button, and now I'm ready to move. So it's pretty fast. Make a correction, move it away, okay, and again holding down nothing, just dragging it out. Here we go, this is what we have. It's cool. If you want to make it a little bit faster to build up something like this, you can use the Ctrl and Shift, and Ctrl Shift can extend multiple edges, so edge loops are actually extended. Now when you're dealing with this, it is you have to be careful because it selects all the edges in the loop. So if you have a longer edges, right now it's not that long because it's only 3 segments, but here I have at least 8, 9. So when I'm holding down Ctrl and Shift, now these edges are also extruded as a bunch. Okay, so if you don't like it and you don't want to deal with this, then you can do what? You can do some kind of a stopper. So for example, I want to stop this edge loop here, and I'm holding the shift key, dragging out a single extrusion, and now when I'm using the Ctrl Shift, I can drag this area, drag this part. Okay, and if you want to make it complete, of course you can create a weldment. Now look for I will use 2 features, one from step build and one from optimize. These are the most commonly used features when you are dealing with the retopologizing processes. And first of all, in optimize, it's good to weld these 2 points. So if you want to weld vertices, you can use the optimize, holding down shift key and drag it and drop it onto the target. So it's actually a target welding with the shift key. It's pretty fast, easy to use. Now step build can close a loop. Now what a loop is, now we'll go back to extend and complete this area here. around the eye. So I will create a circle type ring here by connecting and moving along edges. So again, we are not so far from here. Dragging it again. Alright, now I want to connect. I want to bridge this gap actually. So to do that, and we can use the step build, and hotkey is the same, holding down shift key and shift and click, and now that one is done. Okay, another thing to keep in mind, if you have multiple items, you can select by elements. So in this case I will delete this one. Yeah, here we go. This is also, it's not needed. This is a rough retopologized item. Of course we want to grow it, we want to make it bigger and fully cover the head, but as a starting point, this one's nice and clean. Okay, now take a look at a couple features before we are moving on to the actual retopologizing process. Once you reach a point like this, of course you can't make it perfect, but you can do a couple good optimization tricks. So first of all, this is the relax brush. Relax brush can really smooth out jumpy edges. The only issue is you want to avoid to touch the outer edge of your model because it will shrink it down. So try to keep it inside, try to keep it within your patch, within your surface. You don't have to use it too aggressively, but time to time it's a good idea to walk around and check what it can do. It really helps to speed up the process, and it's much more tidy to use. This one. The other thing that can help to better understand and better flow as the work develops is if you are using smoothing groups. So right now I will switch to polygon mode and Ctrl A to select to select all the polygons, and each polygon has its own smoothing group. But right now, because it's starting from absolutely zero from the ground, there are no smoothing groups yet. So what we will do is we want to clear. It's just like a reset to make sure that nothing happens at the beginning. So make sure that there's no smoothing groups. And when we have the selection, if you're pressing on 1 or any number, that will tell to the polygons, guys, you are joining and you're sharing the same smoothing group. So that means this polygon is smoothing with this one because they are in the same group. But when you have another polygon, for example, just take a look. I will select this one and tell it, okay, I don't want you to be smoothed with group 1. I want you to smooth only group 2. It's actually a separate group. Now, this is what happens. We have a polygon that looks like a cut, but it's actually not a cut. It's part of the game all the time. It is just not smoothing. So it is a visual change. It's a visual fence here. Okay. So selecting back again, turning off smoothing groups, and even switching it back to 1. Now this is a much more tidier and easier to read and recognize group. Okay, so thank you, and we will jump on the whole retopology in the next.